noticed about your two novels, the two things, the streams that I think run through both of those, the powerful messages. One is obviously the link to South Africa, or Southern Africa, but I think the second one is love. There's something quite powerful about the different types of love that we can experience, because you can experience romantic love, and then of course there's this powerful love of friendship. Are you a hopeless romantic?
I am, but I think I'm a better friend than I am a romanticist, if you will. I'm lucky. I have wonderful friends. Still have my my school friends from high school who we grew up in each other's houses. So they're prevalent in my life now. And we haven't lived in the same country for 35 years. So, but like everything, like love, you have to work at it, and friendships too. It's not just they don't just happen. They do just happen, but they don't stay if you don't nurture them. So I think friendship is paramount to our existence.
Absolutely. But I also think what's really important about friendship and the power of friendship is something that you've got history. You've got shared experiences. And I think for people like us who have immigrated and live in another country from where we were born and raised, it's a little bit more difficult when we get there as adults to make the same friendships, because yes, they can develop into something incredibly special, but there's a link with people that we have shared experiences with.
That's very, very true. And for the longest time, I didn't, because we moved around a lot when we first got here. My husband was in the IT industry and travel. So we moved whenever a contract finished, we moved somewhere else. And I was so vehemently against making friends. I had tons of acquaintances, but I didn't need friends. It was very healthy for our relationship, his and mine, because we were alone in the world. We didn't know another living soul here. So, and it was tough. We were very poor. And, as South Africans, we all were kind of middle class, and, we had stuff. And to suddenly come here and have nothing, and it's very humbling. It was very good for us together and as humans, just to realize how lucky we'd been and how hard it is when you start all over again. And we were old. I was 30 and he was 40. So it was big. So I avoided those friendships. And then I met girls, fabulous people in real estate in Virginia, and they just enveloped me. I didn't have a chance to say, no, I'm not ready for friends. I've got my friends. And because, that's how we kind of are. We're very faithful souls, I think. But they're beautiful. In fact, I'm basing my next series on them. And because every year for 25 years, we used to get together for a week. And these girls from Northern Virginia and beautiful friendships have evolved. And I've made gorgeous friends here where we've lived for the last 22 years. So I think we evolve too the longer we're away. But the minute we go home, that is home. Don't you find that, Dawn?
And actually, just the fact that you said that, we still refer to it as home. We still, even though I am now longer in my life in the UK than I was in South Africa, and yet that will always be home.
Be home. I know. It's actually quite sad, isn't it?
Well, it's powerful.
I mean, it's happy, but it is powerful. Yeah. I wanted to weep when you said it, because it's true. I get sad for my country. Sometimes.
Yeah, no, we are. And I know that there are people around the world. And that's why I think for us to connect through writing, through stories, through history is something that is incredibly special. I've got goosebumps just thinking about that. So tell me about Zebra. Now, is Zebra based on a true story, or is it something that you observed as we lived in apartheid South Africa?
Well, yes, it's both of those. The story is really my husband's. He grew up, his parents owned the Champagne Castle Hotel in the Drakensberg. And his best friend was Papin, a little Zulu guy who taught him everything he knew about the Zulu culture. So his was always a story that was so rich. And he knows an immense amount about nature and animals, and all of this was gleaned from this little guy who taught him. He was a herder, but he was in charge because Athol was this little boy. He was just 4, and his parents didn't know what the hell to do with him. I mean, they were trying to run a remote hotel, which wasn't easy, and so I had this story in my mind for a long time, and I wanted to tell it, but I didn't. How, they, in real life, there was never the evolution that I created in the book, because there wasn't, but it was my evolution. It's how I would have loved to have seen it end. So you have to go with, you have that writer's privilege. So, but all the experiences, both the war, because, our boys used to go to the border every year, after they matriculated. So all of those were experiences that I'd had on the outside looking in, and then from his perspective. So I had a wonderful resource living in my bed.
That's handy, because in the middle of the night, handy. when the middle of the night, your creativity suddenly comes to you. You're like, "Hey, wake up! Tell me now."
Exactly.
That's wonderful. I think it's also such a dramatic story in the sense that so many South Africans can relate to an element of that. We grew up in something that was incredibly, it was
wrong,
oppressive, it was wrong, it was bad. And we saw these little sparks and gems of beauty coming out of that, and those relationships. And I think to celebrate that, I think is something very special. And I know that many people who grew up in that time period would find they would spark memories themselves and emotions of that time.
I hope that they do, because that came, I think a lot of us have filled with terrible shame because we didn't know any better. So we were just following what the norm was. And so I think that, really my intention, and it was such a difficult book to write, because in this day of, when you have a sensitivity reader, which is now like one of the highest paying jobs apart from an editor, you have to be so careful that you're not offending people. And which makes writing a book like Zebra very difficult, even like War Serenade, because unless you of that nation, unless you have lived that life, it's very hard to look at it and not be appalled. Or and my editor is awesome. She's just amazing. And she and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to get this by Chris, because she's extremely she's very precise. She's very, and which is everything that an editor should be. But I was so afraid that you said, "Oh no, you can't." Said, "Oh no, you can't." And I thought, what? And I think I was cognizant of that all the time that I wrote it. So I so badly wanted to be in the head of both of those boys to feel what they felt. And who knows if I ever hit the mark, but I could certainly be in Athel's head, which helped. And then I was thinking of myself as Papin and how traumatic that would have been. So, but I guess it's a tough book to read, and I don't think it's everybody's cup of tea, but ultimately it is a story of friendship. And
I think that's the power of it. Irrespective of what the circumstances are, friendships can survive if they have a real connection. And you were saying you're still connected to so many of your friends. I just think, I wrote Matric in 89, and my friends, we have a WhatsApp group, and we're all over the world as well. We had our reunion in 2019. I went to South Africa, and there were like 27 of us from a Matric group, about 54. And we had a great time together. Do you know
Oh,
what was interesting is that we didn't talk a lot about the past. We actually shared a lot about the women that we are now. And that was an
wonderful.
amazing experience. And I think that's true friendship, which I think if we can find those relationships, and that's maybe where your book can kind of highlight those times for people who
I
have been
hope
through
they
that, but
do.
also maybe remember those people that meant so much to them in those
Yes,
days.
exactly. Exactly. And maybe reach out to them because we have the means now. You know,
Absolutely.
when you went to London and you've been there about 25 years or so.
27, yeah,
And
27 years,
yeah,
3 months, 7 days, and 6
how
hours,
many
and
hours?
5 minutes.
I mean, my gosh, you know, the only thing we could do was write a letter because we were poor when we got here. We had no means. We were promised a means, and that's why we came, but there was none. And the only way I could talk to my beloved mother was to write to her
So
and
same
then
with
3
me.
weeks later,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the same with me is I actually didn't have money for the postcards. So I went into those London phone booths and they had these cards, for a good time, ring this number, for a schoolgirl, dressed like a
No,
schoolgirl. I used those as my postcards to send home because I didn't have money for the postcards. So I just went to nipple the
I
advert.
love it.
um but yeah,
That's too
it's
cute.
true, and we can reach out to these, these people who meant so much
Yeah,
to us, people who maybe crossed our paths, and we know they had an impact, and we just need to tell them that they did. And I think that's why,
exactly. And I think that is so cathartic.
yeah.
No matter what, how their lives have changed or our lives have changed, it just they need to know they meant something.
Yeah, now tell me
Because there's
about
nothing richer.
War
Mhm.
Serenade. Is a completely different story, but there's a powerful love connection there as well. Did you have to research a lot? Because I mean, the outline is really, it's a World War II novel, but it's an Italian who went to South Africa in the not concentration camp, war camp.
Yeah,
Um,
it was they
yeah.
called it a concentration camp. So yeah, prison of war
But
camp.
yeah, and so then he fell in love with somebody there. How did that?
Actually, this War Serenade was a story my mother told me when I was little. She used to tell me an afternoon story. She used to have to, you know, our parents, I probably your mum the same, but I know all my parents' friends, drinking was a social nicety. That's what you did. And you had a gin and tonic after tennis, you know, and then so I would think my mom had a couple of gins and tonics, but we always used to have a little lie down after lunch, she and I. And she used to tell me stories, never read me anything. She used to tell me stories. And the best story was about Auntie May and Uncle Greg, and he was a pilot and he was an opera singer. And Auntie May was just a girl in Peter Maritzburg, and they fell in love. And Uncle Greg used to break out of prison and go and see Auntie May. And then the war was coming, and they didn't know how in the world they were going to stay together because he was going to get shipped home. And and I had the story, and I promise you, Dawn, it churned in my brain for years and years and years. And then suddenly, in 2000, I decided this is it. I'm going to learn, because it's always been a movie in my head. So I thought the way to write it would be to learn how to write a script, a screenplay. So I did. I learned my craft. I wrote War Serenade, and I went off to LA to pitch it. And those are very scary, scary things. Pitch fests, they're very thwarting, and you have this humongous hall of producers, and you pay for each of these 5-minute interludes with these folks. So they are producers, directors, talent agencies, and so you pay, I think it was like $25 for 5 minutes, and this was 22 years ago.
Wow.
And then you have your time, and you stand with your little one sheet, as they call it, and then when it's your turn, you're called and you go in and you have to find, in the 5 minutes, you've got to find out where they're sitting because this hall's massive and they've got a little table and a chair and they are so bored. And you have your 5 minutes and you have to ignite their interest, and you're not allowed to have a call to action, say, do you like it? Do you want it? You have to just leave it to them. And if they ask you for your one sheet, you present it. It's very strict. Then the bell rings in your ear and then you've kicked
Like
out.
speed dating.
It is like speed dating. a lot scarier. So, but anyway, I had a producer. He really loved the story. He said, send me the script. So I went home, all at Twitter. I think I had about 4 people who had asked for the script. So I went and I sent it off to these 4 people, and he called me and he said, I love the story. I love the story. He said, but it's too happy, because my version of the story was so pure. They loved each other. They met, they were in jeopardy when they met, but then they lived happily ever after. And it was a joyful story. In fact, the prisoner of war camp was very, very mild. They made dinners, and the brass used to come for Italian dinners in the mess hall because they were such fine cooks. And they used to whittle these exquisite boxes, and the brass used to buy them for their wives. I mean, it was a very integrated system, which obviously doesn't make for very good storytelling or movies. You have to have conflict. So I said, no, I can't do that. I want to be true to the story. I want to tell the story as it is, not how. And he said, well, that's up to you. And I regret now, of course, 2020 vision hereafter. But for a year, I thought, I'm not doing that. It goes against the grain. And then I thought, you're so stupid, Jill. You know what? This is such a phenomenal opportunity. Get your act together, write the freaking screenplay and send it back to him. So I had to learn about conflict. Not that, life had been easy, but when you write about it, it's a whole different thing. So anyway, I rewrote it and I sent it to him, and I'll never forget the call. He called me up and he said, Jill, I just wanted to tell you, now we have a movie. Dawn, I thought I'd honestly died and gone to heaven. He was so excited about this. He attached a director to it, and he was going off to the American Film Institute where they do this mammoth marketing thing, and they pull investors and they get people together to buy movies to produce them. And he called me after AFI and he said, I've got 3 money men and they are super excited about the deal. And that was the end of November. So you can imagine, I was so excited. And on Christmas Eve, I got a call from the director who'd been attached, and she said, Alan died this morning. He had a heart attack and he's gone. And he was gone. He was gone. And so, it was terrible for his family and shocking, but selfishly, so are my dreams. Right in the toilet after 2 years of all this build-up. Anyway, very distressing, very disappointing. And then about 3 years later, a South African company, this director put together a South African film company and me to get this done. And for a year, just messed about. And it's a very collaborative medium, so everybody has to agree, and we were all miles apart. So that never worked. So I was moaning to a friend of mine, an author friend here, and I said, I'm so disappointed, I'm so unfortunate. And she said, to hell with them, write a book. And I said, what? You're crazy. And she said, write a book. And she hooked me up with these brilliant women. They were part of Romance Writers of America group. Since then, I've been with them years and years, but we've since separated from RWA. But oh my gosh, Dawn, I don't think I'd ever felt such camaraderie as I'd felt since I'd left home. All these women from different walks of life, different genres, different income that they were deriving from the books. But so interesting and so kind of such a juxtaposition. You know, we'd have this little thing with glasses on the end of her nose, about 83. And we'd go around the room and what do you write? And what do you write? And what do you write, Sybil? I write exotica. Oh. And then there was this girl with boobs hanging out, and she looked like she had, and she wrote inspirational fiction. So everything you saw was kind of opposite to what you imagined they should be. But these women were so lovely and so forthcoming and so nurturing and so fabulous. And
so you
honestly,
took the book from the screenplay to, normally it's the other way around. Normally people write a book and then they say, oh, now we have to put it into screen. So that was that tricky then?
It you know what, it was super liberating for me, because in a screenplay you're awfully restricted. Every page is 100,000. So you have to be extremely succinct, and you haven't got any characters' thoughts, and you have to, you know, it's very limiting. So you've got to get your message across very, very quickly and very creatively, which helped me a lot in the books. But I suddenly found out they can think. I can talk about them thinking. It was a new concept. I was so thrilled. So, but it took me 3 years and a whole lot of editing, but I have a wonderful editor, and she was very nurturing and cool.
And so, research. Yeah. I mean, did you have to do a lot of research, like historical research?
Absolutely. I needed to know that camp inside out. And also what was so cool, I got to go to Venice and spend a day. I actually spent hours on my own in La Fenice and listening to an opera and that was so amazing. I could because the book was published by then, but I was able to feel what I'd written, because everything I'd written was just gleaned from various sources. But yeah, there was a lot of
and did that reconnect you with your culture, because now you're having to go back and do a lot of research in a country that you're no longer living in, and it's like, wow, because remember, we of course didn't learn the real history of our country either.
Right. We didn't. And yeah, there were things that I didn't know, that I'd heard my parents, when my dad was in the Second World War, he was a fighter pilot. So, but he didn't talk about the war. But my mother talked endlessly about her lovely war that she had, because she never went anywhere. She just entertained the airmen. So, but it was a very cool experience. In fact, this was the easier book to write. War Serenade was the easier book to write, because I was in a state of awe, and my muse was very willing somehow. I think it was my mother chatting in my ear. Zebra was tough because it's a very hard subject.
And you would have grown as well, so through the process.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, Zebra was hard. I struggled with Zebra.
And it's an emotive subject. There's a lot of emotion in that as well for us with history.
And a lot of conflict too in our souls, you know, that we have to overcome.
Yeah. So what are you working on now?
I'm excited about this. I used to fly for SAA for 100 years ago. And
was SAA around 100 years ago?
It was. No, actually, it wasn't. But, and I have these girls that I mentioned that I met in Virginia. I'm using them as my 5 characters, and 4 characters plus 1. And I'm making them all ex-hosties who had a paranormal experience on board a 747 in the crew rest, and they were transported back in time. So my first story, and they meet their soul mate in their dream. And we've got the 5th character who's a psychic, and she puts out a post on Facebook saying, if you ever slept in the 747 of Zulu Sierra 216, email me. And you had a weird dream, email me. And these women who are all really strangers arrive 30 years later on a doorstep in America, in Massachusetts. And they each have a story to tell, and each of them have been transported back in time. The first one is to 1887, in the very first Swan Lake performance at the Bolshoi Theatre. And she's, and this is based on history. So, and she's the understudy and she falls in love with the beggar. And then the story is about how these women get together and figure out how to find the soulmate in this life, to have their best life with this soulmate, or if they've already found him, how to get rid of all the baggage that they brought with them to enjoy this moment in life. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, I finished one and it's not been edited yet. And I've written a half of book 2, but I'll have book 3 out before I launch.
Okay, so it's going to be a series of 3?
It's 5, actually.
5.
And it's called Flights of the Heart. The series will be Flights of the Heart.
It is love again. Look at you.
You know,
Everything's love.
I know, a bit of love there, definitely love. And maybe a little bit of sex too.
Oh, that must be tricky to write.
Oh, it's very tricky to write. It's really tricky. I have books that I reference. Apparently, I'm not all that good imaginatively when it comes to that. So,
that's great fun. So you're writing them each as individuals and then having to weave them in. Is that how it's going to work?
Exactly. That's exactly how it's going to work.
Wow.
So it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and it's not always easy, but I'm loving it.
And so you don't work full time as a writer. So this is kind of your part time, which is kind of another tricky aspect of it.
It is. It's very tricky. I wish, because, you know, when you write, I mean, these days you self-publish, if mostly, and you are truly the pimple on the arse of an elephant on Amazon. There are how many million books a month that get published? And that's not, you know, then there's still 4 bazillion books that are already there. So it becomes you disappear. So I've actually decided to launch my new series on Kickstarter because it's a whole new avenue. Yeah.
So what's the process with that? So you basically go, it's like, it's a fundraising platform, but
it's not so much a fundraising platform as a super fan platform. So you invite people who are really interested in your work to become part of your work. So they become, you name characters after whoever they choose to.
Are you going to have a Dawn in your next book?
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a lovely name. I've got many nice Dawn friends, I have to say.
Well, in America, it's either Dawn or Dawn.
Dawn. Yeah, Dawn.
In New York,
if you're in New York, it's Dawn. And if you Dawn, yeah.
So you basically build a tribe on Kickstarter.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. You build a tribe. And then I'll launch the conventional way after I've done it. But I want to give it some exclusivity because that exclusivity gives you more, I believe, more awareness. And you have the opportunity to make people more aware. Because, you know, both my books are on audio. And I was so excited when we did War Serenaders audio because when you do an audio, you go through hundreds of voices that you choose from. And so many voices. And I'm an audible kind of a person. So when I heard this voice, it had no accent to me. There was no accent. It was just a tone. And I said, this is it. I want him. And of course, he was the most expensive. But anyway, I really loved his voice so much. And his name is Peter Noble. And when you work for a production company, you're not indirect because they're the middleman and they organizing the payments and the distribution of monies and all that sort of thing. So you don't have a chance lest they be left out of the deal, you don't have a chance to speak from writer to narrator. So, but afterwards, oh my gosh, it was so serendipitous. Peter studied under my uncle, Peter's mother studied under my uncle Greg at the University of Cape Town, on which War Serenade is based. He grew up in Pietermaritzburg. He's been in London for about 30 years, I believe. And he's very successful in London. He's won multiple awards. He's amazing. And he's won Audies and all sorts of things. But that I fell in love with this voice, this tone, not the voice. And oh my gosh, Dawn, it's so cool. I don't know if you can. I'll try and send you a link so that you can put in a code and you might be able to. I don't know if I can do that to overseas, but I will give it a whirl. But of course, he has all the accents. He's got the accents for the Zulus, and he's got the accent for the Afrikaners, and he's so brilliant. He did no, I don't think he did Damon Galgut. I think he did do Damon Galgut's The Promise.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and then he did Zebra for me as well. So and his accents are so spot on, and he's brilliant. So to me, his performance was as close as I can get.
Well, because when you write, you hear it in your own head, and now you want someone to sound like how you thought it would sound if you read it.
Right, and he just doesn't disappoint. He's amazing, and so I'm really grateful that he's been part of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was just so crazy.
Do you do any other writing? Like, do you go to writing groups and just write short stories or poetry, or are you just focusing on your books?
I focus on these because there's so much to learn. You know, there's an incredible amount to learn, and not only your craft, but marketing. Because without marketing, you are dead. And even with marketing, you kind of semi-passed away. But you have to be a presence, otherwise you have nothing. Yeah. So it's a huge struggle, but it's so rewarding if you go, you know, if people enjoy your work, and it's just such a beautiful high. But it's this author business is a very, my best friend in South Africa said, "You've chosen such a difficult joy." And how true was that? Because you second guess yourself. You're so insecure about, you know, being an artist is not fun. I'm a realtor I've been a realtor for many years, and I know my job. And I'm extremely confident about what I do and how I can help people. And, you know, that's cool. But oh my gosh, I'm such a wuss when it comes to my writing. I'm so insecure. I think that's absolutely the nature
normal.
Of the beast.
That's absolutely normal. And I think we all feel the same. And that's why I think so many authors die hungry. You know, they
exactly.
It really is about that, because it's, you know, putting yourself out there and feeling that what you've written is good enough for the world. And it's a very scary thing to do.
Hugely scary.
But it's brave. It's very brave. And you've also tackled some really brave topics. And tell us where we can find those books.
Well, they're on Amazon or on Google Play, on all of the retailers. And also jillwallace.com is my website. And I'm running a 15-day promotion because I'm selling books off my site. And I'm doing lucky packets. Do you remember lucky packets?
I love lucky packets.
So I'm doing lucky packets with my books, and then also with all sorts of tchotchkes and biltong and stuff that goes inside lucky packets. So
it's lovely.
I'm doing lucky packets.
So that's through your website then?
Website, yeah. It's always there, but I've just got a 15-day promotion until the end of the month so that I can deliver lucky packets to the doorstep in the US, and it'll probably be there in April in the UK, but it'll be there.
That's wonderful. Jill, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your passion, your love of your home continent, because you were born in Zambia, raised partly in Namibia.
Southwest Namibia.
Yeah. And then you ended up in Joburg.
Benoni, yeah.
Wow. So you've covered it all. So you are truly an African, and you're
I am an
incredibly
African.
passionate about your country and your countries. And it's been such a joy to chat to you. And
Oh,
I will
and
put
you,
all the
Dawn.
links. I'll put all the links so everyone can find you and go and find the happy
Beautiful.
packets for a special
Thank
occasion.
you.
But yeah,
That'll be
enjoy
wonderful.
Florida.
Oh, thank you. We're basking in heat here.
Oh, you see, look at me all wrapped up here.
I see all you. Actually, it's like 65. I'm chilly.
65. You're so American.
I know. I'm so Floridian. Oh, yeah,
Jill,
and I've got the wrong scale. Dawn, you were such a
chat to you
joy.
soon. No
Thank you
doubt.
so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Cheers, cheers.